ANZCO are the sole supplier of grass-fed beef to restaurant chain Aleph in Japan. Cattle are grazed on Canterbury farms and sent to the ANZCO Kokiri processing plant for slaughter, which there they are processed into cuts desired by the importing market. Japan imports a variety of beef products ranging from primal cuts through to grinding beef. The revenue of ANZCO's meat exports is 1.3 billion New Zealand dollars, and the scale of exports has a projected increase which would see this figure rise. This shows the 5 export activities in the beef supply chain. The knowledge and implementation of compulsory on-farm practices is essential in order to gain access to overseas markets. The first activity in the beef supply chain starts on farm. One of many regulatory influences farmers must adhere to is the Animal Welfare Act 1999. In line with the Act, the person in charge of animals has a duty of care to ensure the basic needs of those animals are provided for. These have been broken down into the 5 freedoms. A second regulatory influence that farmers must comply with is NAIT RFID tags. The National Animal Identification System links people, livestock and property in New Zealand, with the aim of increasing traceability from birth right through to death and everything in between. NAIT tags are mandatory and must be attached to the ear of the cattle whilst on farm, no later than 6 months after birth or prior to movement off farm, whichever happens first. During the transportation phase of the supply chain, the Transport Code of Welfare derived from the Animal Welfare Act 1999 must be followed. The Act provides people in charge of transporting livestock with information surrounding the level of care they must obtain to meet the obligations under the Act. It covers maximum periods of time without food and water, effluent procedures, crate designs, and the monitoring and duration of transport. Animal status declaration forms is one of the most significant regulatory influences within the supply chain. The purpose of an ASD form is to transfer important information about an animal to the next person in the chain. Practices on farm ultimately impact the animal's suitability for processing and its export eligibility, and the processor requires such information to guide ante-mortem and post-mortem examination. It also covers TB questions required by the Animal Health Board. ASD forms must accompany all cattle movements and must be prepared by the person on farm in charge of those animals. These documents are then handed over to the transporter to deliver the paperwork to the next receiver of those animals. ASD forms are a significant form of legislation because without the completion of appropriate administration, livestock cannot be accepted by the person receiving those animals, and essentially the supply chain is put on hold. The third activity is processing. Processing of animals exposes its final products to several threats. Due to these threats, the New Zealand Food Safety Authority has prepared a risk management plan to help businesses working with animal products. The plans identify and control hazards and risks associated with production to ensure it's fit for purpose post-processing. During processing, the beef is vulnerable to risks from hazards to human health, animal health, from false or misleading labelling, and risks from the wholesomeness of animal material or product, and therefore risk management plans are enforced regulation. HACCP, Hazard Analysis and Critical Control Point, is an internationally recognised way of attaining the highest levels of food safety and is required by law as part of operating a risk-based program under the Animal Products Act 1999. HACCP runs through the entirety of the supply chain, however is particularly important during processing activities as this phase is most susceptible to contamination. Export certifications and OMARs are regulations associated with the shipping and exporting of beef. An export certificate is an official assurance from the New Zealand Government that provides the importing country with confirmation the products meet necessarily standards and requirements. ANZCO are responsible for ensuring their products meet the relevant New Zealand standards and comply with the importing country's eligibility requirements. This is a significant regulatory influence within the supply chain, as products that don't meet New Zealand standards and requirements stipulated by Japan are unable to enter overseas markets, and this is a real issue for ANZCO as an exporter. Overseas market access requirements outline the prerequisites exporters need to meet to progress their products into the importing country. An OMAR is an inter-country assurance whereby the two countries have worked together to determine what it takes to get products overseas in the most efficient manner. OMARs speed up exports by establishing what documentation is compulsory and having the required paperwork completed. Retailers complete the supply chain. ANZCO have implemented self-regulation to increase buyer confidence. The 4 drivers of ANZCO Farm Assurance Program are food safety, animal welfare, environmental sustainability and traceability, which are all audited independently by Assure Quality. The program establishes expectations and consistency of product quality, and as a result, retailers have a greater level of trust in the relationship and know what they can expect from the products every time. All beef imported by Aleph must be labelled as per the Food Act 2014. The information provided on the labels must be legible and truthful to assist the consumer. Labels must contain an ingredients list, nutritional information, usage and storage instructions, date packed, and country of origin, to list a few. In the sense of ANZCO, restaurant retailer Aleph is supplying consumers with beef imported from New Zealand. Therefore, they require sufficient labelling to assist not only themselves with activities such as storing, but also their consumers, some of which will want to know information required by the Food Act 2014. With regulation comes advantages and disadvantages for all parties involved in each of the 5 activities in the supply chain. Having established regulation creates a competitive advantage, as ANZCO are aware of their obligations and Aleph are guaranteed products abiding by the relative regulation. As a restaurant in the hospitality industry, quality and consistency of product is essential to business. Through regulation, Aleph is guaranteed the same level of premium products every time they import. Consumers also benefit from regulation, as they are aware beef is imported from New Zealand and the high standards surrounding the growth, transporting, processing and exporting of that product. Regulation does, however, come with its disadvantages for producers, as they experience extra compliance costs. To meet regulation standards, companies must employ independent auditors to assess their practices against required standards, and this can be financially costly. Aspects of non-financial disadvantages also result from regulation, such as training employees and attending regulation amendment workshops. Thank you for watching.